Mishima is going out of his way to juice Lucy up more than any of the other characters right now. Because think about this. Like, we're in Elentier. In Elentier, your magic automatically advances. Like, we don't know to the full, like, scale of, like, how much that is. We don't know if, like, what direction it goes into. It could be uniquely, like, advanced for each thing. Like, you could get something like, you know, where Lucy's at, or, like, who knows how Urza's is gonna sit. Like, I'm still thinking of, like, what exactly Urza's could be. Like, maybe she could fuse her armor and weapons together, kind of like if she had her Flame Empress and, say, her Black Wing at the same time, and gain both abilities or something. Because, like, she's in, like, a weird spot. Like, Lucy's, rather, is much easier to kind of look at the basis of it and say, okay, what's one thing about her magic that, you know, obviously is required? Keys, advance beyond the keys, and just magic across the board increased. Like, Lucy's looking good, like in general, but the other characters haven't really shown anything for their advanced magic yet. Like, the only other character we've gotten anything from was, like, Wendy with some of her newer enchants, but, like, that's a completely different set of things. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with the Elentier boost. That's just, like, Wendy getting, you know, more advanced as an enchantress through Irene. But Mishima has gone out of his way to give, like, Lucy a lot here. And I'm guessing, my guess is that, like, Lucy getting it first is going to be the segue into, like, the other characters figuring out their things. Because, like, we can have Natsu just, in general, like, have, like, oh, an outright power increase, like, just raw stats across the board all increased. Or we can get more, like, fundamental advancements into, like, how their magics work and how they're better in Elentier, like how Lucy, again, doesn't even need her keys anymore. And on top of that, like, her level of magic has gone up so much, it's actually really ridiculous. Like, to such a drastic degree. Because Lucy summoning all of her spirits at the same time is, by itself, crazy. It by itself is crazy. Like, we saw her have a short moment of that, like, way back when we first met the Celestial Spirit King and all this stuff going. That went on with, like, Leo's arc, you know, finding out who Loki was with Karen and Ares and everything. But it's like, when you really look at the gauge points for tiers in like, the Fairy Tail world, and then look at where Lucy's at right now versus, like, what we know of, like, way back then. Like, Karen was a famous, like, she was known for, like, obviously, like, around the country and stuff for her Celestial Spirit wizardry. But we knew that she couldn't, like, have two spirits at the same time. We know with Angel was S-Class, and Angel could summon one gold key and one silver key. Lucy, after just getting, like, her magic, like, outright, just quantity-wise increased with Second Origin, she was able to summon two gold keys at the same time. So Lucy, at that point, all the way back in Grand Magic Games, had stepped into the S-Class level of territories. And given her scuffling with Brandish, and, you know, various other feats she's had since the part way into part 3 of the series, like, going into Alvarez and everything, and then obviously, like, stuff here as well, she's easily gotten to, like, Wizard Saints levels of power. And granted, like, Lucy can be, like, a lot weaker than, like, the rest of the main cast and still, like, hold up with them, because, like, her value is very heavily put on magic quantity, the level of utility she has with all of her spirits, and her level of intelligence. Like, you know, we have Natsu, like, outright physical fighter, you know, head right into things, he's jumping into battles and stuff, he's fighting right forehead to forehead with his opponents and whatnot. Like, Urza has very high counter utility with the way that, like, her armors are, how she's got a lot of different utilities of what she can do to lower her enemies' attacks and whatnot, with, like, different elemental variations, being able to hit them even through whatever their elemental things, like we saw with Agil. She ended up having a wind sword to disperse the sand, a water sword so she can damage him, and then stuff like Nakagami and whatnot. And like with Gray's just got, like, absurdly flexible magic. It works in all categories. He can use it, you know, make copies. He can use it for travel. He can use it to block. He can use it for literally close, mid, and long range type stack, including, like, extensive long range. I remember back in his Super Freeze Arrow, as well as, like, having stuff like Ice Make Silver to just flash freeze entire areas. And then Wendy's like a super healer who can hold herself. She's a super support wizard that can also fight. Like, we don't need to go into more description about like Wendy's value. I'm sure everybody's paid attention for more than 5 seconds to know Wendy is probably the most high value character in reality, because on top of support, she's also a healer, but also can hold herself. Like with Irene versus Wendy, like Irene has way more of like the enchantress aspect of it, and like Alexa raw power. But like the thing that Wendy will always have is the fact she can heal, because there's very few characters that have healing magic. We know healing magic is a lost magic, but like Lucy in this chapter was ridiculously powerful. Like no shit. Like when I read the chapter this morning, when I saw like I read the chapter right when it came out. Roz came out, bought the chapter, and went through it. I was really impressed by Lucy. And then like when I was rereading it, like when the fan translation came out, I got even more impressed. Like Lucy, before even getting to the point of summoning all her spirits, drops Aquametria. Like she drops her own powerful spell. Like granted, it's not like a ridiculous, unfathomable move, but like Aquametria is still like a Stardress Lucy attack. It is clearly some form of weird variant from like her having water magic with the Aquarius dress. But I've always assumed it has some form of off branch with Aranometria, just because the naming of Lucy probably basing similar naming ideas off of her abilities and whatnot. It could just be coincidence, but I mean, like, regardless of which, it is still a Star Dress Lucy. It's still really powerful. It's still a fairly good-sized move. And then after that, she goes into summoning her spirits. But also, even further after that, she ends up using her Stardress mix and going into her Leo Virgo form. And we didn't see much of Lucy after the point of doing that, which is important, and I think it's gonna be one of the bigger things to take note of in the next chapter, because I think the next chapter is gonna focus more with Urza. But Lucy going from Aquametria, all summon spirits, without breaking a sweat. Like, she doesn't look worked at all, and that's one of the big things just to note about her in this chapter. Like, her doing all these things, impressive. Her doing all these things and not seeming phased is ridiculous. Like, granted, again, when she summoned all her spirits way back in the early portions of the story, she did it for a split second, and then her magic was out. And when she achieved the ability to summon 3 spirits, we know that it's not just the same thing as like, oh, you have to be twice as strong to summon 2 spirits if you have the ability to summon 1 gold spirit. There's more of like a jump, because Lucy has been able to summon a gold spirit by itself for a long time. Then she later gained her ability to like close the doors of her own accord, because at the start, once she summoned them, they're staying until either she runs out of magic or they decide to leave. We didn't get her closing the gate until Galuna Island. She was against Sherry, but we all the way from that point until the Grand Magic Games, Lucy couldn't just regularly summon 2 gold spirits. And we know that when she achieved the ability to summon 3 golden spirits, like Aquarius knew that meant that she had the potential to summon Celestial Spirit King. So it's like each one is like a very fair jump. Like when you think about it, like a big bookmark for their class, like for Celestial Spirits. Like I said, Angel was S-Class. The Rassilon States were S-Class at the time. Like, randomly, we know that, like, the magic has naturally become stronger over, like, time periods. So, like, characters, like, their outright raw magic amount has increased and everything. And just the normal ether nano in the atmosphere. But Angel was S-Class. And she could only summon 1 gold and 1 silver. Lucy surpassed that a long time ago. And I genuinely think that Lucy right now is well into, like, Spriggan category. I don't think for a second that she wouldn't be able... Like, this version of Lucy could easily fight a Spriggan. Granted, not like Irene or August or any of them, but, like, people like Nineheart, Brandish, like, I legitimately think that she can hold her own against multiple members of the Spriggan. So it's like, the level of utility of summoning all of her spirits is ridiculous. Because, one, they're scaled up to her. They're not summoned, and they're at the length that when we first were introduced, and we know that like summons, like their power is augmented through the summoner. Lucy summons all of them, so they're all going to be, they're capable of putting up to much better degree. Because in the beginning of the chapter, even shows like a really good example of this. When they're starting to fight, Gray brings up the whole fact that they're up against, like when Yoko says like 100 monsters, like Gray brings up, the Pandemonium event all the way back in the Grand Magic Games, like Urza 1v100, the Pandemonium event. And there was obviously, like, big difference in, like, the power levels of, like, it doesn't even really need to go into that much. But when he says that, it does bring up the fact that, obviously, like, Urza's got this under her belt, but Urza's like, no, these ones are much stronger. And we don't really have any way to compare them of, like, each of these is as strong as the S-Class one or something. I think they should be well beyond that, given where they're at now, and the fact that high wizard saints are absolute fodder to Spriggan. So, like, everybody here should be easily capable of clapping these things if they were even the S-Class one from the Grand Magic Games. But regardless, they're powerful, and Lucy's spirits are all fighting them. They're all doing their best work, just completely just running through all of these. You have, like, a really nice Aquarius and Scorpio panel, too. I actually really like that. I don't know what Gemini was possibly doing in that, but, look, her level of utility from her spirits is crazy. Because you have Leo, outright good fighter. He's got light-based abilities. We've seen that he can blind people. We've got Sagittarius for range. We've got, not just range, like, he's got pinpoint accuracy. Like, even, like, to the degree that we saw, like, at weaker levels, like, even in, the Sun Village, he was able to match arrows with sniper rounds. Like, he was just able to, like, mid-shot, too. He didn't, like, aim at the guy and wait for him to shoot. He shot an arrow mid-sniper round and tagged it like it was nothing. He didn't break a sweat on it. You have Virgo. Virgo obviously isn't a fighter, but, like, her level, like, her ability to actually, like, create pitfalls is actually really useful, because it just gives, like, a terrain disadvantage. Like, imagine you're fighting somebody, you're fighting against Lucy and she's got all these out. Like, with Virgo, she can continuously just create holes all around the place and completely screw up your footing. So, like, unless you have flight or anything, like, she is just hard to deal with in general of, like, being on the battlefield. Ares is super, super underappreciated, because her magic is primarily defensive based. The fact that it's, like, the super soft wool, and she could use it up for, like, blocking attacks and, like, creating cushions and stuff for Lucy. If she's, like, smacked back before she's gonna, like, collide with, like, a wall or like a cliff or whatever, you can just summon Ares. Ares creates, like, a big cushion, and then she just hits that and it's fine. But the big thing about, like, Ares' wool that is very, very overlooked is it's, like, the level of comfort, like, comfortability, is that a word? I don't know. The sheer level of comfort that it has, apparently, could just slowly make you stop wanting to fight. And the ability to, like, drain somebody's will to fight is a hack. So that's a good move in general. And, like, because the thing about it, like, if you were going to use that on an opponent, you set it up, they hit it, and even for those split seconds that they might just be not focused because they're thinking, like, holy shit, like, this wool is absurdly comfortable. For some reason, I don't really feel like fighting anymore. Like, even if it just catches you for a couple seconds, that's a couple seconds that completely just messes up your, like, whatever scheme and strategy you had going on, and gives Lucy time to do whatever her next step is going to be. I mean, Cancer's, like, one of the unfortunate ones, because, like, he doesn't really have any crazy powers. He's just got, like, his speed scissor cutting. Like, we know that he can actually do some bladed work with it, but I'm like, he's probably the most underwhelming on this list. I wish Machine would do something extra with him, like give him some cool scissors, or just give him some swords. Like, yes, they're scissors. Like, he's not a swordsman, but he can use them for cutting and slashing attacks and stuff. And when we see Lucy with the Star Dress with it, she uses the blades, like, takes the scissor blades, uses them like swords. So maybe Cancer will get, because even, like, in this, Cancer's is done in a little bit of a sillier manner. He just, like, cuts the hair of one of the yokai. So it's just like, man, he's good for what he can do. He doesn't have to be great. Like, even if he's just low levels of just kind of, like, movement, attacking, like, that's still useful in, like, the grand scheme of things. Like, you have Scorpio. Scorpio's able to, create these giant sand attacks. Obviously, just in general, an elemental attack going to be useful, as well as, putting giant clouds of sand in the area. Plu is there for some reason. I think Plu is just there for fun. I'm fine with that. I like Plu. Everybody likes Plu. Taurus, outright just raw physical strength. Easy, just by itself, one of the baseline pluses to have, especially for Lucy, who isn't that physically strong. You have Gemini. Gemini is ridiculous. Gemini, coincidentally, isn't that useful at Ellen tier for against the spiritual arts people, because the whole thing with Gemini is based on magic amount. So Unless it's like, oh, even though you're really high in spiritual art, we work on magic, you have low magic, so Lucy can just copy her. I don't really see Gemini doing a whole lot outside of like the base boost that we saw that Gemini just has regardless of being there. She can turn into Lucy and then just double Lucy's magic, and then drop a double powered Uranometria if she really wants to. Like, she's got like a really solid team here. Like, she's got like a very useful set. Like, Lucy 1v1ing is actually really dangerous now, because on top of all this, she's got her star dresses. She can use any of their abilities like right off. Like, because imagine all of this and she's fighting somebody magic based, and then she also drops her Gemini star dress, takes their power, has Gemini turn into them, so you're essentially fighting yourself, everybody here, and then Lucy with your powers on top of all her other powers. Like, Lucy's actually really broken, and just her level of utility and like how high that like output is at the moment. Lucy was ridiculous this chapter. Like, we got a lot of other like cool moments. Like, we just got to see some cool attacks. We see Urza do her Blumenblatt. We got to see a Fire Dragon King mode, or not Fire Dragon King mode, a Fire Dragon King technique from Natsu. Not like in his base, so it's not as like all out, but it's like you see that giant heat beam shoot out of Mount Black Moon, which is really cool. I thought visually that was just really neat to put in there. It wasn't like anything crazy, but it was just nice visually to put in there. And then an explanation from Yoko on what her abilities are. Because like she's like not as impressive as Kokune. Like that's gonna be really hard to top. Like Kokune, unless Yoko starts bowling out busted yokai that just have really absurd powers. Because for the most part, her yokai value is in the fact that she has infinite amount of yokai. She can just continuously summon them, continuously just keep spamming them. And then she's got like these little Shikigami copies that will look like her, and she can just hide amongst them. She's got flight. Like she's just like this amazing classical summoner with some defense support built into her. She's a really rounded set for what she can do right now. The only way I can see her really improving is, like I said, if she starts pulling out very powerful yokai, if she can just start to bring out ones that are actually notable. Because like these ones, outside of ones that are just have slight elemental advantages, because like when Lucy does her Aquametria, some of them, like there's like a Kappa one, it's like, okay, yeah, they're not really going to be that affected by water because they're water yokai. And outside of that, like she doesn't really have any yokai that are of noteworthy presence. Like the only two that I could see being that like were somewhat of noteworthy strength was like you had the bandage one that like Urza went to go slash, but it's like Urza's attacks and like the way that it was set, it was just a bad matchup. So like whereas like that bandage one go against Natsu just sets it ablaze. And then the big smoke one, but I don't really see that one being a danger anymore, especially with all the cast members here and like how powerful Lucy is right now. But the other characters, like their stuff can wait. Like Lucy's in her bag right now. She's out here just all around making this chapter her chapter. And Yoko, I think, really needs to bust out some big stuff if she's not going to just amount to being like a pretty formidable opponent, but more for characters getting some free flex room to show off new abilities and stuff and just getting some cool fight scenes. Because she doesn't, like I said, she hasn't shown anything crazy, but at the same time, like, it could just be, like, her whole craziness and her level of power could just boil down to, like, what she's shown right here. Because the fact that she can just infinitely keep summoning yokai, she has flight, and she has the ability to just keep away from her opponent while spamming more and more yokai continuously, is by itself really useful. But I mean, I feel like she needs more. She is like a direct minion of Selene, so I feel like she's got to have more. I'm still wondering if she could merge with her yokai, because Wendy being able to just use Raise to get rid of the status effect means that it's more of like almost like an enchant style thing. She's imbued, like the yokai were imbued onto them, their power it was set to them. Because if it was like they fused with them, she would have had to use her separation enchantment, which makes me think that Yoko can do that to herself, I would assume. I mean, like, I've been picturing her biggest move, it's like she takes all of her yokai and merges with them and becomes like some big spooky amalgamation of all her different, of all her yokai. Or just maybe busts out some really big yokai, maybe pulls that spider one out that Urza was, powered up by. Because she needs to do something. Like, if she just gets defeated, and like, I'm not that opposed to it, because like, she doesn't seem that impressive, at least right now. She, like, at the moment has more of like a, the first down bad guy kind of setup. The only person I would have guessed before her obviously would be Mimi, because I personally think that Selene has more than just these three. It'd be really weird if it's just these three, but it's like maybe she doesn't need more, but at the same time maybe these are just her best workers, the ones she likes the most. There's still obviously a lot of room for her to have more have more minions, but I would like to find out, at least within range, of Yoko being defeated, if there is more. Because Yoko, like, if there's only three, here's the thing, if there's only three, I would like them all to be more impressive than what Yoko is doing now. Because with Hakune's ice is busted. It like, can just outright say, you can't use any of your powers, and it'll just freeze you. I assume there's a threshold of it, like, she couldn't do that to Selene. Whereas, like, if they could just, like, if Greg goes up against her, if Greg just is outright so much more powerful than her, then she can't do anything, that'd be one thing. But I think that she is going to be a way better of a, like, an all-around fighter than, you know, somewhere like Yoko. Whereas Mimi's is the weird one, because Mimi's power, like, as far as we've seen, is just, like, she's very physically strong, which is, could be impressive if it's done to a ridiculous degree and we start seeing her, like, pick up mountains like freaking soccer balls and start chucking them at people. If we start getting to, like, areas like that where it's, like, just absurd fictional physical strength, sure. But right now she has very unimpressive levels of shown abilities, but granted, we haven't seen much of her. Yoko, though, like I said, Yoko, I really want to see more from Yoko. I don't want to see her just get beaten by Urza, but I'm not opposed to the idea of her losing. Like, if Urza defeats her in the next chapter, and it's like Yoko's value came down to just kind of like these three key abilities, that's still really good. But if Yoko goes down, then there has to be more Moonlit Beauty Gods. They can't just be the three if one of them loses this easily. If Yoko loses, and like next chapter 79, say Yoko loses, she doesn't bust out any more crazy abilities and stuff, then I hope that there's more Moonlit Beauty Gods, or at least that it's like Selene says, oh, I like three, so I'm gonna pick somebody else to replace her, or something like that, where it's like Yoko's value wasn't actually that big, and it's like she just was somebody that Selene picked, and it's like, oh, well, I liked her maybe for X amount of reasons, but picking somebody else that's more powerful. It's actually really cool. Say, like, Selene is the reason that the three Moonlit Beauty Gods are as powerful as they are, and at any point, Selene can just pick a new person, power her up, and then put her in Yoko's place with whatever ability she has, and she's just as powerful, if not more powerful, than Yoko. I think that would actually be really cool, because it would do a lot with Selene, and like just show Selene's presence, Selene's level of just like how much of a powerful opponent she is, her threat level, and it would show as well as like a side to where it's like Yoko was literally so expendable she could replace her at any given time with literally anybody. I think that would be a highly valuable like level of just extra tack on Selene's character. But it's like, as long as there's something to make up for the idea of Yoko losing. Because again, I'm fine with Yoko getting defeated, but if she's defeated, it can't just be like, well, that's one of the Moonlit Beauty Gods down, and there's like nothing beyond that. Just because it would feel a little bit underwhelming for them, for just their clique. And granted, they're not the big opponents for this arc, but I do hope that they have like a good showing. Like, I want each of them to have, like, a good display. They are as much as, like, the God Seeds, because the God Seeds literally were, they were asleep for centuries. They got up. Their first fights. Outside of Alderaan, I didn't really expect any of them to have... I wanted to have some fights, but, like, I was assuming Gears was going to be more of a fighter, but, like, we can't count Wolfen, because the way his powers work, he's a wild card. But Gears, Metro, and Doom were all classic casters, and they all had pretty much no combat experience. So them going down wasn't as, like, it was like, okay, sure. And then, like, mechanically, like, it wasn't bad. Like, it wasn't something that, like, I hated, but it wasn't something that I loved. It was more of, like, okay, cool. Like, they had, like, powerful abilities. Then we found out, like, how they worked mechanically. Like, essentially, if you don't take down the main Alderaan, they're just going to come back up. So it's like them being not that durable and not being absurdly hard to take down if you get past their hacks and stuff and are strong enough to just deal like a killing blow to them. That it's like, it doesn't really matter if you can't defeat Alderaan. So them have, like, the way that they were set up, I think is like a perfect example of like how to have your enemies, or like the bad guys, not be too, like, the minions, not like the main boss. We're not talking about the main boss. Like, the henchman level characters not be so insurmountable that they themselves almost feel like their own, like, character boss. But if they are defeatable, like, pretty early and, like, without too much difficulty, there has to be something behind them that will kind of build off of that. Like I said, if Selene literally can just replace Yoko like it's nothing, that would be a perfect way to do it. Because then she could just keep throwing opponents at them and just keep shuffling, just keep chucking them. Just say, like, okay, you and you, just maybe pick two barely recognizable characters who have, like, no real distinct features, powers them up, and then they become, like, characters like wow, you upgraded from background character with no name to character with a name. You might even get a wiki page. Well, they would get a wiki page assuming they had a name. But, like, the chapter itself, I think really just came down to Yoko's fate. Like I said, what exactly is going to go on with her. I'm really hoping that she ends up having more than just these things, because, again, she's directly adjacent to a really big character, so I think she has to have more to utilize rather than just tons of minion spam and then, keeping away from her opponents. Like, I don't need her to be, like, a crazy fighter. Like, she doesn't even have to have the whole merging with her yokai. If she can just start pulling out, like, a couple yokai that are of, like, big value. A couple of really powerful ones that, like, maybe Natsu has to go into Fire Dragon King mode to beat. Like, the characters have to actually put up a good fight. I don't need them to be, like, all out. But if we can get, like, a medium level difficulty, I'd say, from all of them is pretty solid. Like, each of them have to at least bust out some of their bigger moves and, like, put in some effort. As long as Yoko, I think, is defeated without just kind of, like, feeling like they toppled her casually, I think that is really what I am hoping for Yoko. I really want Yoko to be at least a fairly good fight for them. To where it's like, oh, wow, we took some damage. You know, we didn't just stroll through her. We had to actually do something, pretty much. They're not just, like, throwaway bad guys. You know what I mean? Like, a degree higher than the Hungry Wolf Knights, but, like, what would be, like, a good middle ground? Like, I'm kind of hoping that with them, maybe we have, kind of like if you had, like, fix something like the Hades fight. Obviously, that was a big main boss fight. But maybe kind of lower the bar down to something like the Hungry Wolves, where it's like, they're only getting kind of worked on while they're not putting their efforts in, and the second they start really putting in some work, they're going to start kind of just pushing back and really just overwhelm, their opponent. I think that would be the perfect way to do it. The second they start really busting stuff out, Yoko just realizes that she's screwed, and, like, she just gets completely dominated at that point. Like, the stuff with her and Urza I thought was really cool, because, like, with Lucy, it was, like, a very Lucy chapter. It was a very Lucy-centered, for the most part, chapter. I was very happy about that. I really like seeing her just get some spotlight, get some flex in. Well, like, at the end, when we see, Urza goes, slashes into Yoko, that's when you had, like, the whole Shikigami fake. And then there's just a bunch of different Yokos all over the place. And it's like, no matter which one Urza slashes, there's just another one. They're just having decoys. But Urza ends up finding out the real one. And additionally, at the very end of the chapter, Yoko has her, she has, like, this cool bladed staff. I have to go back and look at other chapters, because I don't think she had that until now. She just pulled this up, and I like it. I think it's cool that she has a weapon. I'm hoping that it's more than just, like, literally just a piece of metal. I'm hoping maybe there's, like, some form of like, additional ability that she has when she uses it or something. But Urza's saying how, like, the voice from her abdomen is completely different from when it comes out of the paper, which is really cool, because that just shows that her level of outright kind of, like, attention, sensing, and her, like, how good she is at, like, tracking her opponents down. And, again, a very skill-based thing, because if it was just like, oh, I'm just going to keep chopping until I find the right one, I mean, that would still really work. That'd be more of, like, a badass kind of, like, relentless one, but when you have Urza just being like, I was able to find out which one you were based off of, something as like, deep down as like, oh, yeah, the way that sound is coming out of your natural body versus the paper is different, and I was able to determine that and find the real you. And when Yoko's whole thing is how, oh, they can't do anything to the infinite yokai. Like, she had, like, an exact thing. It's like, oh, nobody can win against infinity. And then it's like, Urza's just like, I'm gonna put an end to infinity. And I was just like, man. another go to Urza quote. Like, that's just cool in general. Like, this is an infinite mob spam, and she's just like, I don't care, I'm going after you now. She's showing why you, as a summoner, Lucy is great. Because that's one of the things that is always overlooked in Fairy Tail, is that summoners in general, like, you think back of the way back in the Karen fight, as well as like any time that they've dealt with a summoner, rather, they have lower durability. Like, they're used to not getting hurt because they're summoners. They fight from a distance. They're strategically based, regardless if it's keys or if it's like the Yokai stuff or Nineheart with his Historia. Summoners aren't designed for taking damage, whereas Lucy built up a level of durability and resistances over time by not fighting the way a summoner does, and just takes the damage outright. And because of that, she's actually very durable, and she's actually a pretty like fair fighter of skill, like in close combat, who's actually able to do her own thing and perform, and again, take hits. That's the big thing. That's how one of the things with Gray too is Gray as an ice make wizard, or just a maker wizard in general, they're not used to getting beaten up as much as he does, but because he fought a lot with Natsu, he's able to build up a resistance over time. So Lucy W's all around. I mean, again, literally a Lucy win at the end, just given what's gonna happen to Yoko. Something that Lucy wouldn't have nearly as much trouble with. Not fighting Urza, but like fighting with somebody who can directly get it and hit you as a summoner. Lucy would be more than okay. Like, she can take a hit. I don't know about Yoko, though. We haven't seen her actually take damage. I don't imagine she's one that's going to be that durable after getting smacked around. Especially after, like, again, her summoning style and, like, the whole Shikigami and flight thing. She has, like, this perfect summoner attack and defend strategy. The only way that it could be better is if she had teleportation to, like, just get out of there and still keep fighting. But anyway, other than that, though, comment below. Thumbs up the video, prefer the like button, subscribe button. This was a bit longer than I expected. Actually, I have to check to see how long this video is because of the way that my recording setup is now. It doesn't show like the time until I'm done. So, I knew I was going to talk a lot for the chapter, but it was very little to talk about. Like very little to talk about when it came to the large scale like set of cast. Like, it was mostly talking about Lucy and then like Yoko / Celine, which again, I'm always game for. Like, Lucy getting some nice spotlight is always a plus. Celine's spotlight is always a plus. I'm always happy to see what's going on with her. And then just how Yoko is going to perform after this and how they can connect to Celine and everything else going on. I'm hyped for it. So, just gotta wait a little bit. Like, 2 weeks, painful. I know. Me more than most. I am a very impatient guy by itself, and I'm forever going to be used to the weekly Fairy Tail release, and we've been at bi-weekly for what, like 2.5 years now, and I'm still not used to it. So, you know, just gotta hold out. Next chapter, I'm guessing, is gonna be more Urza focused, probably Urza's advanced magic. I'd be more than happy if it's just Urza, but I mean, if I can get something for Gray, and like Grace is the one that I'm just like, I want to hurry up and get to it, but it's like it's just so far away, so I can just hype on him whatever he's got. It's not to even before we get to whatever his advanced magic is. We know that there is a further end point of Natsu we'll get to one day with his, having his demon and dragon powers active at the same time. But anyway, other than that, comment below. Thumbs up the video from the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. Further than that, I appreciate everybody subscribe. Thank you all for listening. Bye.